Hey, where's the big flashy banner? That's all we could afford. Boy, those were a lot of weeds. Alright, continuity. When I last stood in this spot, I talked about how Godzilla is pretty much my hero and inspiration. And I seriously can't believe you're gonna have the audacity, nay, the gall, to sit there and ask, well, why is that? Gee, I don't know. Maybe because Godzilla's the coolest, toughest, most interesting dude around. He's been a hero, anti-hero, villain, single father, a demonic entity possessed by the restless souls of those who died during World War II and— oh, wow, okay. Question, is there an actor more handsome and with more range, gravitas, and weight than Godzilla? Answer, no. Peep this for a second. Big bad Godzilla goes skinny dipping in a volcano. What's in a volcano? Molten hot-ass lava reaching temperatures upwards of 1200 degrees Celsius. And my man dips his little toes in there like it's his own personal jacuzzi. Then he waltzes on out with the most swagger you ever did see, while explosions turn the whole area into a hellscape like it's nothing. Meanwhile, your dork ass can't even take a sip of your freshly brewed coffee without burning your delicate little dork lips. Oh my god! I love Godzilla! Now wait a second. Feast your peepers on this. Godzilla, king of the monsters, not only lighting up my life, but the Hong Kong skyline. Glowing red, steaming out of his little cat ears in what could be described as the most extreme case of heartburn ever recorded, with the man's blood-pumping organ becoming a nuclear reactor on the verge of a nuclear meltdown that threatens to blow the entire goddamn Earth up into smithereens. Holy shit! And after throwing claws with the devil incarnate, he becomes so powerful, he literally melts away in a scene that made grown men around the world weep. And even earned him a Lifetime Achievement Award. Godzilla kicks everyone's ass, even his own ass. But he's not down for the count. Godzilla's essence transferred over to his son, who becomes a massive, fully grown Godzilla in a matter of seconds to take on the mantle of King of the Monsters and continue the legacy. Even when Godzilla dies, he doesn't. Godzilla, back from the dead, resurrected like Jesus Christ.
Sir, this is a Taco Bell.
That not enough for you? Okay, let's talk feats of strength. A giant three-headed space dragon weighing in at 100,000 metric tons. And Godzilla just tosses him around like he were a feathery light anime body pillow quickly thrown into the closet by some degenerate dork frantically scrambling to hide his sinful nature from his mother. And no, this is not a case of art imitating life, so piss off, don't ask me this. With his Herculean strength, Godzilla catapults the beast over his head, fires his thermonuclear breath with precise aim. The sheer force of the blast pushing this 100,000 metric ton behemoth into outer goddamn space, where it promptly blows the crap up. Is that not the coolest goddamn thing you ever did see? Well, yes. Yes, it is.
Alex, don't you think you should reel it in a bit?
No! No! Don't shut me up! Da-da-da-da like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
You know, it took me so goddamn long to release this episode that not only have the words from my novelty t-shirt faded away, but that also not one, but 5 Godzilla movies came out at the time it took to get this thing done! I can't even fudge and keep up! Now, you'll notice that I censored my cuss. That's because a lot more has changed since I've been gone. For starters, if it's not Mr. Rogers' levels of wholesomeness, you get demonetized. That's just one of the many great features that YouTube implemented since the last episode. My favorite feature is when they take features away. Like how in the last one I said something along the lines of, oh, I'll put an annotation here when the next episode comes out, but no more annotations. How delightful. Now I look like an asshole, but that's almost as great as how you can't even see the videos from the people you're subscribed to anymore. YouTube got rid of all of that. It's awesome. YouTube got rid of itself. Can't even access the site anymore. Type in youtube.com in the address bar, you get some message about some highly trained monkeys or some shit getting dispatched to solve your problems. Try refreshing the page, you get doxxed. Somebody rings your doorbell, kicks you in the dick. Courtesy of YouTube. There's also a lot of figures, goddamn toys in the shot. That could apparently be seen as problematic now, so we should probably just go ahead and take it upon ourselves to censor everything that could be seen as childish. Ooh, there we go! Man, so much has changed since I've been gone. Say, I wonder who's president? I'm just gonna take it upon myself to look that up as if I don't already know, and my ensuing, totally legitimate, on-the-fly, and potentially over-the-top, hilarious response is surely gonna bring us a moment of levity, and not bring an already long video where we've got a lot to cover to a screeching halt. Last time, we took a look at the Showa series, so now we're gonna take a look at Heisei, the second Godzilla series. The naming conventions, by the way, correlate to the Emperor of Japan who reigned at the time that these movies were released. The first Godzilla series that ran from 1954 through 1975 coincides with Hirohito, who reigned from 1926 to 1989, and the name of his era was Showa. His successor was his son, Akihito, who was the Emperor from 1989 up until 2019, and the era of his reign was named Heisei. So technically, the first movie that we're looking at, 1984's Godzilla, is actually a Showa movie. But to avoid confusion, this one's still considered the first movie in the Heisei Godzilla series, since it's part of that continuity. And yeah, this one's just straight up called Godzilla, meaning that Godzilla's another one of those franchises with a belated sequel/prequel that for some reason shares the same name as the first movie. But in true Godzilla fashion, this one has more than one title, as it's also referred to as The Return of Godzilla. But also, like those other sequels to long-running franchises, it also acts as a reboot of sorts, as this one is a direct sequel to the original 1954 movie, ignoring all of the other sequels from the Showa series. When we talked about the Showa series, you could clearly see how the Godzilla movies were becoming more and more outlandish and fantastical with each outing. Godzilla 1984 takes the series back to its more somber and serious tone, channeling the original Godzilla film. So there's no dancing or ball blasting here. This is serious. This movie modernized Godzilla for the time in a pretty effective way. Like the 1954 original, the movie treats the arrival of Godzilla like an actual disaster, only this time, not only do we see how Japan reacts to it, but other parts of the world as well. Godzilla himself was also updated with the changing times, sporting a new look and beefed up size. The original Godzilla character stood at 50 meters, or about 164 feet, while the 84 Godzilla was 80 meters, or 262 feet, I guess in an effort for Godzilla not to look like a manlet against the new skylines in Japan, which looked vastly different back in 1954, where a relatively smaller Godzilla could look huge and imposing no matter what. Godzilla was still portrayed by a man in a suit, but this time around, certain shots featured a 16-foot, nearly $500,000 animatronic Godzilla, known as the Cybot Godzilla. Oh, Jesus!
Good grief, he's naked!
Which was mainly used in close-up shots, probably because as ambitious as this was, the movement on the Cybot was a little janky. They also used a life-size replica of Godzilla's foot for certain scenes, which is super cool. This movie's seriously one of my favorites, and one that I've had a lot more appreciation for as time went on. I love the evolution of the how would we really react to Godzilla scenario in this now, at the time, new 80s setting. It plays it off pretty straight, while also not forgetting what type of movie this is. While it's pretty grounded, there are still some of those fantastical elements thrown in, like with the inclusion of futuristic weapons, such as the Super X aircraft. But remember, this is a movie centered around a giant radioactive dinosaur, so if we're gonna give that a pass, we should also accept the Super X. Speaking of the Super X, this thing is what gives us our major battle for the movie, as like the original, this is another solo outing for Godzilla, so there's not another monster for him to fight. That's right, in this one, there's no fighting. No fighting! There's no fighting! But there is a little creature in the form of Shakira.
Oh, baby, when you talk like that, you make a cynical mad.
What? What do you mean we're canceled? What do you mean they find me cringy? What do you mean the worst show on the internet? What do you mean my career's over? What do you mean I have made a gross and heinous lapse in my judgment? Shakira's, a dog-sized mutated sea louse, is the only other creature in this movie, and it only appears briefly in the beginning. Before Godzilla 1984 came to be, Toho was throwing around other ideas to reinvent the Godzilla series, one of them being a cancelled film titled The Resurrection of Godzilla, where Godzilla was to fight a shape-shifting creature called Bagon. Ultimately, the final product would become the first time Godzilla didn't fight another monster since the first movie. Also in the spirit of the original movie, Godzilla 1984 had a very Americanized version when it was brought over stateside. Interestingly, the American version of 84 was actually a direct sequel to Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 1956 American re-edit of the first movie. Enter Godzilla 85, released a year after the original Japanese version. hence the title. I specifically mentioned Godzilla 1985 being a sequel to Godzilla King of the Monsters because it incorporates one of the key elements of the 56 re-edit in that it adds in scenes with American actors, most notably Raymond Burr, who actually reprises his role from King of the Monsters. Aside from Frankensteining Raymond Burr into the movie, other changes include various cuts and weird edits to the film, including a couple story changes, with the main one being that Godzilla 1985 insinuates that the Godzilla in this movie is the same Godzilla that attacked Tokyo in the original film. Having this be the same Godzilla creates a bit of a plot hole later on, as later movies in the Heisei series make it clear that the Godzilla in this timeline is the second of its kind. And this makes things even messier because the third movie in the series involves time travel and explains how this Godzilla came to be. Overall, Godzilla 1985 is a bit sloppy and kind of neuters the original version released a year prior. The American cut was critically panned when it was released here, and it has the distinction of being the only Heisei movie to be released theatrically in the US. Currently, the American cut has yet to be made available on Blu-ray or DVD. It's been in a sort of limbo for the longest time, and it's complicated because Roger Corman's company, New World Pictures, the company that distributed Godzilla 1985, has been defunct since 1997, and apparently there's complications with clearing some of the music that they use for this recut, and I guess it's just not seen as worth the hassle. So if you want to watch this specific version, you'll have to dust off that old VCR. What's that? Asks a small chunk of the audience? Man, look it up. For the longest time, Godzilla 1984 in any capacity wasn't available in the US once DVD took over, and was the last Godzilla movie to not be released here in this format. And this actually changed in between the release of the previous episode of this Intro to Godzilla movie series and this one, with Godzilla 1984 finally being released on DVD and Blu-ray in September 2016 by Kraken Releasing. Pretty noteworthy that this is also the first time the original uncut version of Godzilla 1984 was made available in the US. The English dub featured on this disc is Toho's international dub of Godzilla 1984. Again, to clarify, that's Toho's English dub of Godzilla 1984. The American recut, Godzilla 1985, is nowhere on this disc, and is yet to be officially released on DVD or Blu-ray. 5 years later, we got the first sequel in the Heisei series in the form of Godzilla vs. Biollante. Rated PG for traditional Godzilla violence. That's hilarious. This is where shit gets pretty damn cool.
As if it already wasn't.
The plot to this movie was actually the result of a contest held by Toho, something that they've actually done before. Jet Jaguar, Godzilla's size-changing robot pal from Godzilla vs. Megalon, originated from a drawing submitted by an elementary school kid for a previous contest. This time though, the contest winner was a dentist, and like Jet Jaguar, the original submission was heavily altered for what would eventually appear on screen, but a few elements from the submitted script were kept in the final movie. The plot to this movie directly follows the events of Godzilla 1984. While the Showa series had a very loose continuity, the Heisei series had a much stronger emphasis on it, with each of the sequels picking up where the last movie left off, and having characters that carry over. Most notably, Miki Sagusa, a girl who shares a psychic connection to Godzilla and makes her first appearance in this movie. Godzilla vs. Biollante also maintains the same serious tone of the previous film, and was the movie that kind of started a trend where the other monsters that Godzilla would face were somehow created from his DNA. Biollante is a mix of Godzilla's cells, plant cells, and the spirit of a scientist's dead daughter. You just gotta see this one, man. This movie rules, and this was one of the ones that inspired me a lot when I was younger. I even made my own sequel comic book as a kid. 6 Oddzilla vs. Biollante 6. Did I really make that many? And I guess this is number 6, issue 1? What's the subtitle here? The most? The most what? Jesus, 5-year-old Alex, don't leave me hanging like that! This is one of the more unique Godzilla movies, and Biollante is such a cool monster, and just a really amazing special effect. Even though we're only 2 movies in my opinion, I think the effects in this film, this time directed by the late Koichi Kawakita, are probably the best in the entire Heisei series. This one's definitely one of my favorites, but I'm not the only one that loves it. I feel like you'll see this one pop up in a lot of people's top 10s, and in 2014, a poll in Japan from fans and judges voted this as the best Godzilla movie. Despite the love for this film today, it wasn't a box office smash when it came out. It wasn't a bomb by any means, but it underperformed in the eyes of Toho, enough for them to put the series on hold for 2 years, and prompted them to shift focus a bit, focusing more on classic characters for Godzilla to fight in the next few installments. But before we get to those, quick rundown on the home media releases for Biollante. This was another one that was kind of elusive for a while. The English dub version was released direct-to-video in the US by HBO back in 1992, and that, along with the Laserdisc that came out the year after, was all we'd get until 2012, when Godzilla vs. Biollante was finally put out on DVD and Blu-ray. It was also reprinted 2 years later, this time with 2 shitty Asylum movies tacked on for some reason. Monster and Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus. Asylum is that company that puts out those schlocky CGI B movies. No, not that kind, stupid. I mean B movies, not B movies. And those mockbuster direct-to-DVD movies made to trick poor grandmas everywhere into thinking they're buying their grandchildren the hottest new movie of that year. Why they decided to attach these movies to Godzilla vs. Biollante, I have no idea. It's almost insulting. And don't get cute with me and say, oh, well, Asylum movies and Godzilla movies, they're all one and the same. It's all B-movie bullshit. Because I will fight you. And I will win. I'm Greek. We're sneaky. And we fight dirty. We'll wait in a giant-ass wooden horse all night for the right moment to strike. So watch out. Now, to be honest, I feel kind of bad for praising this movie so much, only to say that at the time of this recording, the DVDs and Blu-rays that I mentioned have since gone out of print, and as a result, have gone up for ridiculous prices on the aftermarket. And on top of that, there's not even a way to legally stream this movie online. That's the first of many issues that plague Godzilla home media releases outside Japan, which we'll get to more in depth at the end of this episode. Now, in the age of the internet, there are ways you can get things that you want, but I'm not going to advocate that. Here, we're only going to talk about the ways you can legally obtain these movies. Just, please don't tell Toho that I was tracking down bootlegs back in the day. Home media releases are always a crapshoot. Licenses come and go, and things change constantly. Many of the notes that I took for this episode over the course of the last 4 frickin' years had to be rewritten because so much has changed during the time of this production. Hell, this episode could be outdated like a month from now. Because of that, I'll always try to update with the most current information in subsequent videos and through social media platforms. For now, fingers crossed Godzilla vs. Biollante becomes more readily available again soon. Anyways, let's move on. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Oh yeah, we're not goofing anymore. This is a goof-free zone. Goofing is off limits. Okay, maybe a little goofing. Hold on to your cheeks and put on your best socks, boys and girls, because we've entered the next level. I don't know what that means. With Godzilla vs. Biollante, Toho gave us something new. When that didn't pay off like they wanted it to, they played it relatively safe. For the next couple movies, we'd be reintroduced to other members of Toho's Big Five, bringing out the big guns straight away with King Ghidorah, who is arguably Godzilla's arch enemy. In the Showa series, Ghidorah was depicted as an alien who travels from planet to planet, destroying shit, causing a ruckus, and making crumbs. What the Heisei series ended up doing was taking these characters and putting a different spin on them. Here, instead of being an alien invader or used as a pawn by an evil alien race, Ghidorah is artificially created by people from the future using smaller, genetically modified creatures called Dorats, and oh my god, there they are!
They're so cute!
No, actually, they're not. They're actually quite stupid. But yeah, these Futurians, if you will, travel back in time to warn Japan of a future where Godzilla wrecks their shit. So what they end up doing is going back even further in time during World War II in an attempt to erase Godzilla from history. For the first time, we actually see Godzilla before his atomic glow-up, when he was just a regular-ass, squeaky-voiced, acne-riddled dinosaur and not the handsome atomic man we know today. While the Futurians teleport a dying Godzillasaurus to a different location, they very sneakily and unsexily dump their gross-ass Furby nightmares off their ship. What essentially happens is that these reject Neopets take the place of the Godzillasaurus that would become the Heisei Godzilla after the H-bomb tests, and instead create King Ghidorah, who the Futurians used against Japan in an effort to change a future where Japan has become too powerful. Whoa, this is a Japanese movie, you say? So, it was all a big ruse, further proving that people from the future are not to be trusted. I had a conversation with a man at a bar who said he was from the future once. I woke up the next day at an abandoned meat factory with a huge scar on my abdomen, lying in a puddle of urine that definitely wasn't my own. See, I drink a lot of water, so my urine is very clear, a fact that I'm very proud of, but I digress. Pretty sure this dude took a couple of my organs. Hello? Did you click off this video? I don't blame you. Anyways, it's a pretty unique take to have Ghidorah's origins tie in with that of Godzilla's. This one was pretty heavy on the sci-fi, what with the time-traveling, androids, and whoa, Mecha King Ghidorahs! Alright, that's pretty badass, and yet another different spin on the character. It was almost a back to basics, if you will, even bringing back original Godzilla composer Akira Ifukube for the score. This one's got a lot of fun moments, outstanding miniature work, and is a real standout in the series. It's definitely a fan favorite, and one of the ones that I watched the most as a kid. We wouldn't get this movie until 7 years later in 1998, when TriStar released it on VHS. Yet despite not getting this movie over here until years later, we'd actually hear about it on the news on 2 occasions actually. Once during a controversy when this movie was dubbed as anti-American because of its depiction of American soldiers during the World War II scene. Guess it was seen as being in bad taste to have American soldiers getting trampled on by a dinosaur? Nah, but real quick though, like my grandpa was killed by a dinosaur, so like, I get it. And also when one of the Godzilla suits used in this movie was stolen.
Godzilla is on the loose. The model was made for a new Godzilla movie coming out in Japan. Now, the theft won't affect the film's premiere. I'm sure you're glad to hear that. I know. Jerry's relieved.
Okay, no one needs your condescending attitude, you witch. Along with the VHS, TriStar also released the movie on DVD, pairing it with the next movie we're going to talk about, Godzilla vs. Mothra, which has since gone out of print, but it's still available for pretty cheap if you get it used, and it was repackaged for Sony's The Toho Godzilla Collection Volume 1 DVD, along with 4 out of the 5 Heisei movies TriStar has the rights to, plus the first 2 Rebirth of Mothra movies. The DVD, however, is presented in a full screen aspect ratio and only includes the English dub, which sucks. What also sucks is that the DVD 2-packs are those stupid double-sided discs, and I know what you're about to say. Alex, that sucks. But I'm familiar with it, as it is like my priced copy of Fat Albert the Movie on DVD, which includes both widescreen and full screen presentations on each side. And to that I say, yes, you're right. You gotta be extra careful as to not touch either side of the disc with your Cheetos fingers and compromise the whole thing entirely. Now stop interrupting me, please. The more recent Blu-ray release, also paired with Godzilla vs. Mothra, fixes these things and is presented in a proper widescreen format that includes the Japanese version, so that'd be the one to get. It can also be currently streamed via iTunes if that's your thing too. Godzilla vs. Mothra reintroduced another classic character, Mothra, this time bringing along her moody counterpart, Batra. The previous film brought in that classic Toho sci-fi, and this one brings with it that mythical element, which is a staple of Mothra's character. Because of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah's success, the producers initially flirted with the idea of bringing Ghidorah back, similarly to how he appeared in the very next movie after his 1964 debut film. They opted to instead go with Mothra, who was more popular with the female demographic, and since women embodied most of Japan's population, and Toho wanted another hit, it's almost a no-brainer. So they dusted off a scrap Mothra movie screenplay from a couple years prior called Mothra vs. Bagon, there's that guy again, and retooled it to fit into the Godzilla series, replacing Bagon with Batra, and incorporating Godzilla, of course. That's a bit of a trend with the Heisei series, playing around with shelved ideas and reconceptualizing things, constantly swapping out one monster for another. Like, did you know that around this time, Toho was actually trying to get another Godzilla vs. King Kong movie off the ground? And when they ran into licensing issues with Kong, they even considered having Godzilla go up against Mechanicong, the robot doppelganger from 1967's King Kong Escapes of all things. Kinda glad they didn't go that route. It would have been an awkward consolation prize. Like, hey kids, sorry we can't go to Disneyland, but here's $20 for the Showbiz Pizza place down the street. Remember to come straight home if the bear gets creepy and violates your personal space again. Bagon is another one of those ideas that got tossed around a lot. Poor slut just couldn't catch a break. We're getting sidetracked though. Another thing the Heisei series liked to do was incorporate elements from American movies. We got a little Kmart Terminator action with the last one, and here, they're going all Indiana Jones on our asses with this Mickey Mouse shit. Godzilla vs. Mothra may actually be the Godzilla movie I've seen the least amount of times. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, it's just, it doesn't really stand out to me. But what do I know? This movie sold the most tickets in Japan out of all the Heisei Godzillas, and was the highest grossing Japanese movie of 1993, and second highest grossing movie overall in Japan in 1993, second to Jurassic Park. In fact, to this day, it remains the second highest grossing Toho Godzilla movie in Japan, getting beaten out only recently to 2016 Shin Godzilla. So yeah, you can say this one's pretty popular in Japan. So much so that the 1992 Godzilla design specifically was used as the basis for the giant roaring Godzilla head peering over the Hotel Gracery in Shinjuku. God, that thing's so cool. Earlier, I mentioned that Godzilla vs. Biollante was kind of the peak when it comes to the special effects for the Heisei movies, in my opinion. And going down the line, this is where that opinion really starts to form. Don't get me wrong, there's some great work here, but I feel like one of the weakest aspects with the visuals in the Heisei series were the flying creatures, and there's kind of a lot featured. I mean, this movie had two. Even with the previous movie, when Ghidorah flew, he just felt stiff and lifeless, especially when you compare it to the erratic movement that he had in the early Showa movies. He was nowhere near as animated in 91. And the same could be said here. But while the 91 Ghidorah was actually a really nice design, Mothra just... I don't know, man. She just looks like a fucking piñata. Batra looks pretty neat though, especially the larva form. Like Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, we wouldn't see this one in the US until 1998. The home video releases for this one also mirror Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, since those two movies are paired up. Interestingly, when this movie was released in the States, TriStar decided to label it under the title Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, which, yeah, is kinda dumb. My guess is that this was done in order to avoid confusion with the similarly titled Showa movie Mothra vs. Godzilla from 1964, where the names are just flipped around, with Mothra getting top billing in that one. Plus, at this point, there's already been home video releases of Mothra vs. Godzilla that had it labeled as Godzilla vs. Mothra, so some of you are probably watching this thinking, oh my god, who cares? What is he blabbering about? In 1993, we were reintroduced to yet another classic character, only this time, it was kind of a 2-in-1 deal, or 3-in-1 depending on how you look at it. 1993's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla not only reintroduced Mechagodzilla, but Rodan as well, completing the lineup of Toho's Big Five for the Heisei series. These guys, and gal, are referred to as Toho's Big Five due to them making appearances in every era of the Godzilla franchise. So now, Rodan and Mechagodzilla join the mix, but there's even more familiar territory here with the inclusion of Godzilla's son. While it's not Manila from the Showa series specifically, it does reuse the idea of Godzilla having a son. And no, like the Showa series, there's no Mama Godzilla. Ain't nobody want to see these fat dinosaurs procreate? Okay, actually, maybe there's a select group of people on the internet that do. You know, those that will never procreate themselves, or even enjoy the act that comes of procreating, because nobody wants to be in the same room as them. Like Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla's origin was reinvented for the Heisei series. Instead of being an extraterrestrial cyborg created by a villainous group of space apes, he's now created on Earth, using futuristic 23rd century technology that was used to create Mecha King Ghidorah as a blueprint by a special division of the United Nations called the United Nations Godzilla Countermeasures Center. For short. Mechagodzilla being reverse engineered from the future tech of Mecha King Ghidorah is a cool way to tie in this movie with the previous one, and really showcases that emphasis on continuity I was talking about earlier. We also get combining robot action in this one with the Garuda, a warship that's a spiritual successor to the Super X line from Godzilla 1984 and Godzilla vs. Biollante, that combines with Mechagodzilla to form Super Mechagodzilla. Ooh! Mechagodzilla's not the only one to get beefed up though. My boy Rodan gets some upgrades as well in the form of Fire Rodan, where for the first time, he has a breath weapon with the uranium heat beam. Whoa, baby! That seems to sum up most of the fights in the Heisei series. Instead of feeling like the wrestling matches that we got in the Showa series, it's just a lot of standing and blasting. Everyone's got a blast! Make them all blast! The bird, the piñata moth, everybody! Godzilla's son even gets an upgrade, probably the best one, and that he's upgraded to actually look like a Godzilla creature this time, instead of the deformed, conjoined brother from Basket Case.
What's in the basket?
Feeling lonesome, cause I got no friends.
This incarnation of the son is simply referred to as Baby Godzilla in this movie, and unlike Manila, we actually see him grow over the course of the next two movies. And this was actually originally set to be the last Heisei Godzilla movie. See, at the time, TriStar was set to release their American Godzilla remake the following year, and Toho wanted to avoid competing with that and let the Americans take their crack at it. Of course, America wouldn't make their absolute boner until 4 years after the original release date, and so Toho kept it going for 2 more movies. And just like the previous 2 movies, the US wouldn't get this one until 1998 as well, where it was available on pay-per-view and released on VHS the following year. The official US title for this one is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, probably to avoid confusion with the 1974 Showa movie of the same name, but it's just sloppy and could potentially be confusing to casual viewers because it almost implies that this is a direct sequel to that movie, even though this is part of a completely different series in continuity. Curiously, we wouldn't get a DVD of Mechagodzilla 93 until 2005, also released by TriStar. The DVD version of the movie was released on its own, not a double feature like the Ghidorah and Mothra disc. Thankfully, also unlike that release, the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla DVD is presented in widescreen and features the original Japanese version. The single release DVD is still readily available, and it's also the only Heisei movie in Sony's Godzilla Toho Collection Volume 2, where it's lumped in with all 6 Millennium Godzilla movies in one messy-ass set. God, my OCD hates this. It's also available on most streaming services like Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, even here on YouTube. And, of course, it's on Blu-ray as well. This time, paired up with the next movie we're going to talk about. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, the red-headed stepchild of the Heisei series. Yeah, this one definitely feels the most pointless. It definitely has its fans, but this one's sometimes regarded as one of the worst in the franchise entirely. Despite that, and his dumbass name, Space Godzilla is actually a fan-favorite monster, probably because his design is actually kinda rad. Like a lot of others, I was actually first exposed to Space Godzilla through the Godzilla Wars toy line by Trendmasters. I remember being super intrigued because I've seen a lot of Godzilla movies at this point, but not that guy. I remember thinking he was really cool with his funky-ass colors that weren't actually movie accurate, but rather painted like the amazing Noriyoshi Orai poster, which, can I just say, these posters are absolutely stunning. Orai was the man, and his work was next level. Is that a thing people say? I gotta look that up. Is that like 90s slang, or is it still current, like the funny Christian Bale gag in the beginning? These toys came out a few years before we'd actually get the movies over here, so I didn't know who the hell this was. But he looked cool. I guess that's always been Space Godzilla's appeal. He also kind of resembled Super Godzilla from the Super Nintendo game called, Super Godzilla. Super Godzilla was a powered-up form Godzilla would take on to defeat the game's final boss. Oh my god, this guy again? After all the no-shows and like 48 other movies, this big boob's only actual appearance is in some mediocre video game? This is the loser all these pimply-faced 14-year-olds on the internet write fanfictions about and obsess over? Well, that's weird. What's also pretty cool about this movie is that they actually threw in a relatively obscure Toho character in this one from one of Toho's non-Godzilla related sci-fi movies, Mothra, from 1957's The Mysterians. The original Mothra has the distinction of being the first mecha in a Toho movie, and it's a personal favorite of mine. In this movie though, it just looks like a whack-ass Mechagodzilla, who was actually supposed to return, but they opted to go with Mothra instead. On the opposite end of the cool spectrum, Godzilla's son is back, now referred to as Little Godzilla, who looks nothing like he did in the previous movie, or like he even belongs in this movie. God damn it. Okay, the little shithead's actually pretty cute. The TriStar DVD was released as another double feature, appropriately paired with the last movie in the series, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, and corrected the full screen issue while still neglecting the Japanese version. This release is also out of print, but it was repackaged in the Toho Godzilla Collection Volume 1 DVD. Still, the more recent Blu-ray, now attached with Mechagodzilla, is the one to get. Alternatively, there's also quite a few options to stream this one as well.
Men's asses!
That brings us to the final movie in the Heisei series, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, the movie where Godzilla dies. Oh my god, spoilers! Okay, first off, this movie's like 24 years old. Second, it's literally the tagline on the Japanese poster. Yeah. This movie skips the goofing, downs a stiff drink, rises out of its seat like a goddamn champion, speed walks towards ya, slaps you in your chubby little baby face with the absolute heartbreak you're about to endure, and oh my god, I'm weak in the knees, boys. It's like if they re-released Citizen Kane in theaters, and the theatrical poster just said, Rosebud is the sled, fuck you. Wrapping up Japan's run of Godzilla movies to make way for America's impending garbage, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah served as a pretty good potential finale to the series, having extremely close ties to the original 54 film, with Godzilla's opponent, Destoroyah, being born out of the Oxygen Destroyer, the fictional weapon used to kill the original Godzilla. An original pitch for this movie actually had an even deeper connection to the original film, with the working title being Godzilla vs. Godzilla. Whoa. Does this mean we were gonna see Mama Godzilla after all? I mean, we've already seen these movies inject things from classic American films. Were they gonna take a page out of Kramer vs. Kramer and chronicle Godzilla and Mrs. Godzilla's custody battle over Godzilla Jr.? Pretty ambitious to throw us a curveball and completely shift genres with a legal drama for Godzilla's supposed last Japanese flick. But nah, the actual idea was actually much cooler. In it, the Heisei-era Godzilla was set to fight Ghost Godzilla, the vengeful spirit of the first Godzilla from 1954. That's pretty insane, and that idea wouldn't fully go to waste, but we'll get to that in a bit. Honestly, we could probably go through all the scrapped ideas from the Heisei series and beyond in its own episode, there's so many. But we already have a lot to get through. So now, let's get back to our lovely, thick-ass crustacean friend, Destoroyah. Well, that looks familiar. You ever see this really old movie? All these whack-ass crabs come together to form Satan himself. Destoroyah's final form is actually a really metal design, and he looks super menacing, but he kind of falls victim to a lot of the shortcomings with the effects in this series, and that's kind of it. He kind of just stands there.
Menacingly!
I mean, he flies around and shit, sure, but man, is his mobility pretty stiff. Godzilla's design also gets a noticeable cosmetic change here. After Godzilla 84, Godzilla's appearance remains somewhat consistent, with a few more subtle alterations being made to each suit. Godzilla as he appears in the Heisei series is almost seen as the quintessential Godzilla design by fans, and it seems like even Toho themselves. The Heisei era of Godzilla offered a lot of unique ideas that, unfortunately, sometimes fell a bit flat with their execution. It started to lose a little bit of steam towards the end there, but all in all, it was a solid update to Godzilla for the time, and the impact that it had on the overall franchise seems everlasting, with a couple of the films in this series being among some of the best in the entire franchise, if you ask me. If you want to check out the final film in this particular series, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is available on most streaming services, and readily available on Blu-ray, where it's paired up with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, a movie from the next series we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, I think we need to talk about the Emmerich in the room. The history of America's first crack at a Godzilla movie is another one of those topics that can be covered in its own episode. So right now, we're only going to quickly tackle the actual final product, the notorious 1998 American Godzilla remake, often regarded as one of the worst and most embarrassing things to happen to the Godzilla franchise, period. Oh, now would you looky here? I'm using alcoholic beverages as a clear and comedic indicator that the mere thought of having to discuss this absolute travesty and crime against humanity is enough to leave me absolutely distraught, and getting absolutely chooched is the only way I can manage the task at hand. I'm an internet personality! TriStar Pictures Godzilla, directed by Roland Emmerich, the Independence Day guy, and starring that one guy from that one movie everyone associates him with. You know the one. Simba 2? Oh God! My liver! Also starring Frenchie the Professional, woman whose career plummeted because she was in Godzilla 98, half the cast of The Simpsons, and apparently, child predators.
You have a seat right there.
I thought he was 18, he's told me.
You want to try again?
It becomes a tearful performance for an actor who says he's played many roles.
What would I have seen you in?
I've Never Been Kissed, Pearl Harbor, Godzilla.
Really though, this movie went down in infamy in not only Godzilla history, but film history as a whole. And if you're watching this show with little to no knowledge on Godzilla, chances are, even you've heard about this movie and its legendary suckage. So what's the deal? Does this movie really suck? Well, with a tagline like size does matter, what do you think? Did you get it? Like a penis! Yeah. Does this movie deserve the hate that it gets? Probably, yeah. Can I see why some people might like it? Sure, yeah. But the ultimate question, does this movie honor the source material? Hell no. And therein lies the main problem. It's like this movie took Godzilla, went down a checklist of what makes him Godzilla, and did the exact opposite with almost everything. And that isn't surprising, considering the movie was directed by somebody who went on record saying he doesn't care for the source material.
Yeah, if they let us change Godzilla enough, if they kind of let us do our movie, if we can change even the image of Godzilla, we would be interested. The best way I can describe this movie is New York and its giant rat problem. Seriously, Godzilla's just a pest in this movie. Little Squeaky Mousy shows up, traps are set to lure Mousy with the promise of treats, Mousy retreats, caught Mousy, but uh-oh, there's never only one. Now we need to call the exterminators. Does this sound like Godzilla to you? No, it doesn't. Hollywood has a bad reputation for taking foreign properties and completely butchering them, and this movie became a prime example of that. I was still pretty young when this movie came out, and even I was taken aback. I remember my dad showing me a magazine, it might have been like Empire or something, telling me that this was the new American Godzilla, and at first, I didn't believe it. Even as a kid, I looked at that and it didn't register as Godzilla to me. The only reason I knew my dad wasn't messing with me was because it actually said Godzilla on it. When I actually saw the movie, I enjoyed it a lot and just accepted it as a different version of Godzilla.
but most weren't as forgiving as I was when I was a kid. Godzilla 98 was shot down by pretty much everybody. The general audience, film critics, Godzilla fans, even cast members from previous Godzilla movies, and Toho themselves. And despite an aggressive ad campaign, this movie was ultimately considered a box office disappointment. The ripples caused by this movie's mondo assery would be felt for years, and totally changed the course of Godzilla history. For a while, it felt like Godzilla's image was pretty tainted, and the brand was practically seen as poison. And the merchandising for this movie was insane. All these companies wanted a piece of that Godzilla pie, and pumped out anything they could with Godzilla's big dumb stupid eyeball on it. And of course they did. This movie was supposed to be a surefire hit. And when it instead turned out to be a surefire shit, companies sat on their Godzilla-sized mountain of Godzilla tchotchkes.
That is one big pile of shit.
Take our aforementioned friends Trendmasters, for example. Their extensive toy line based on Toho's Godzilla practically put them on the map, and their equally extensive Godzilla 98 line was probably the catalyst for their downfall. And notice how I called that line extensive. That adjective works for a toy line based on Toho's Godzilla because there's a whole plethora of characters to pick from. Here, they went all Kenner Jurassic Park on our asses, and it made no sense. This was another solo Godzilla outing, so the line just had like 100 different versions of the same character. You got Combat Claw Godzilla, Thunder Roar Godzilla, Tail Strike Godzilla, Living Godzilla, Supreme Godzilla, Ultimate Godzilla, My First Colonoscopy Godzilla, then a bunch of baby Godzillas and vehicles and humans that are completely out of scale. Get your very own Nick Testicules and oh my god, Philippe! It's my favorite Godzilla character, Philippe! It was ridiculous. And once the movie came out, these toys just sat on shelves, and retail companies just about had it.
No more! I'm sick of Godzilla!
Trendmasters had yet another toy line planned, this time based on Godzilla the series, a Saturday morning cartoon that continued the story of the 98 movie, but retail companies rejected it, opting to not take in new Godzilla products since they were already stuck with a bunch of Godzillas and Philippes they couldn't move. And so that line would ultimately be canceled. It's a shame too, because not only would the series have lent itself much better to a toy line, but the show was actually quite good, despite being an offshoot of a pretty lackluster movie. It injected a lot more of that classic Godzilla flair that the movie was sorely missing, and it surprisingly still kind of holds up to this day. We'll have to get to that one more in depth at some point. Keep in mind that this episode's more so relatively quick, I talk a lot, overview of the Godzilla franchise, not individual reviews for each movie. If you're disappointed that I glanced over something pretty quickly, fret not, friendito, because we'll probably take a closer look at it another time. Anyways, the cartoon was really the only sequel this movie would get. It was initially planned as a trilogy, but after the movie's performance, it was obviously shit-canned, and TriStar just sat on the movie rights until they expired. See, even the guys that made the movie that turned Godzilla's name into mud didn't want anything to do with it after. It's as if they entered a room and cut a huge fart, then went, oh, it's gross in here, I don't want anything to do with this, and then just left. If you want to check this movie out for yourself, you can find it literally anywhere. On DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, the Walmart bargain bin. Hell, you can even watch it on your PSP and probably your sandals if you wanted to. Since the Hollywood Godzilla movies are so easily accessible, we're actually going to skip over the home video releases for the other ones. Now, it's been over 20 years since this movie came out. The smell of TriStar's fart is practically gone, and Godzilla fans have finally started to calm down. Oh, who am I kidding? They probably found something else to bitch about. The point is, people have eased up on it over the years. Some good actually came of it too. For better and for worse, it did bring Godzilla back into the public's consciousness outside of Japan, which led to the remaining Heisei movies finally being on video and DVD like we talked about earlier, so that's cool. Nowadays, the thing you'll hear with this movie a lot is that it's a decent, fun, schlocky monster movie, but the one constant that's been echoing for 22 years is that it's not Godzilla. And evidently, Toho themselves agreed. So much so that this movie caused them to prematurely pull the real Godzilla out of retirement in Japan only a year after it came out. And that's where we enter the Millennium era. People asked if the real Godzilla would please stand up, and so he did. Godzilla 2000 Millennium was a true return to form, and ushered in a new series of Godzilla, this time dropping the Emperor naming conventions, as this one is called the Millennium series. Like Godzilla 1984, Godzilla 2000 Millennium is a reboot/sequel, ignoring all previous films except the 1954 original. It wouldn't be the only movie in this new series to do that, however. The Heisei series had a real focus on continuity, and the Millennium series pretty much did the opposite, acting as an anthology series of sorts, where each movie was its own standalone thing that used the original 54 film as a springboard. Only 2 movies in the Millennium series share continuity with one another, which we'll get to shortly. When Godzilla 2000 Millennium was brought over stateside by TriStar of all people, the name was shortened to just Godzilla 2000, But the title of the movie wasn't the only thing that was shortened. Not only did TriStar redub the movie in English, but they completely redid the sound design and also chopped out a few minutes from the movie. Now normally, this would raise red flags, but the edits they made were done to improve the pacing of the movie, and they're actually pretty effective. This English dub hams up the dialogue a bit, but despite that, it's actually a really decent dub, way better than the international dubs Toho commissioned for the other movies. I've made a big stink about some of these DVDs only including the English dubs because not only do I just think it's important to include the movie in its original native language, but the international English dubs for the Heisei movies and the other Millennium movies in particular are pretty atrocious, man. Overall though, Godzilla 2000 may actually be a good introduction to the series for a lot of people. It has all the elements of a classic Godzilla movie with a slightly modern flair to it. The great thing too is that it's easily accessible. Godzilla 2000 was the only Millennium movie to be released theatrically in North America. When we got it on DVD, it only included the American cut with the English dub, and a French dub if you want that. I'll see myself out, sorry. Recently, it's also been made available on most streaming services, but it's also been put out on a standalone Blu-ray release, which also includes the longer, clunkier Japanese version for the first time. Outside Japan, the subsequent Millennium movies will be released straight to DVD, but the good thing is, we didn't have to wait more than half a decade for them to come out like with most of the Heisei movies, as they were coming out consistently a year or two, give or take, after they premiered in Japan. Now, because the rights to all 6 Millennium movies are under the same umbrella, making things easy for a change, we're gonna take a look at the home media releases for the other 5 before we continue. Every Millennium movie after Godzilla 2000 was released individually on DVD, all in widescreen and all including the original Japanese version. Some of these individual DVD releases are still readily available, but others are out of print. If you want to get all of these movies in one fell swoop, they're all part of that ugly-ass Toho Godzilla Collection Volume 2 DVD mentioned earlier, along with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 93. The 5 Millennium movies after Godzilla 2000 are also available on Blu-ray, now on double feature releases, though still on individual discs, and also on most streaming services. Now that we got that squared away, let's move on. Godzilla Cross Megaguirus G-Extermination Strategy, or just shortened to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, is probably the most overlooked movie in the Millennium series. Nothing too crazy about this one, but it does have some pretty cool ideas. In this timeline, Godzilla never died in 1954. We see flashbacks of Godzilla's attack from the first movie, only the stock footage they use replaces the original Godzilla suit with a 2000 suit, which is pretty cool to see. Godzilla's opponent in this one, Megaguirus, and her evolution cycle are offshoots of a creature seen in the 1956 Rodan movie, which is a pretty cool throwback. And the weapon they use against Godzilla in this, a man-made black hole, is pretty unique and pretty cool. Overall, this one's really pretty cool. Go ahead and put that quote on the DVD cover. The next Millennium movie is regarded as the crown jewel of this series, and as one of the best Godzilla movies overall. Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, giant monsters all out attack, often abbreviated as GMK by fans, was directed by Shusuke Kaneko, the man behind the amazing Heisei Gamera trilogy, which we'll definitely have to take a look at one of these days. So you know this one's gotta be good. While Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla played things relatively straight, this movie goes pretty off the wall in delivering things that we've never seen in a Godzilla movie before. In past Godzilla movies where Godzilla's the antagonist of the story, instead of being the straight-up hero, he was still never malevolent. To date, this is the only movie where an incarnation of Godzilla is inherently evil. It changes up the mythos quite a bit, with this Godzilla being a supernatural entity manifested by the restless souls of those killed by the Japanese military in World War II, looking to seek vengeance on Japan for its war crimes. Mothra keeps her role as a protector, along with Baragon, a monster who first made his appearance in 1965's Frankenstein vs. Baragon, more commonly known as Frankenstein Conquers the World, who totally got snubbed here with his name being omitted from the title. These two are also joined by King Ghidorah and serve as the guardian monsters who are prophesized to protect Japan from Godzilla. That's right, another total role reversal here, where Ghidorah, arguably the biggest archenemy in the entire franchise, is actually the hero this time around. Mothra and Ghidorah weren't actually the director's first choices for the Guardian monsters. Baragon, the only Guardian monster that remained from the original script, was originally going to be joined by Anguirus, who first appeared in Godzilla Raids Again from 1955, and Varan, a monster who appeared in its own standalone film called Varan the Unbelievable in 1958, and would later go on to be integrated into the Godzilla series, similar to Baragon. And by integrated into the Godzilla series, I mean he appeared on the posters and promotional material for 1968's Destroy All Monsters, as well as being in the movie for exactly 2 goddamn frames. What a shame, because I love Varan. However, nobody except dumbass geeks like me give a gliding shit about Varan, so Toho requested that Mothra and Ghidorah be put in, as they were seen as the bigger box office draws. Like we saw with the Heisei series, monsters always get shifted around with these movies, and ideas can change so drastically between their inception and release, to the point where the final product is barely recognizable from the original draft. Overall though, this one is definitely a strong entry in the series. Changing up the mythos like this was definitely interesting, and going off of the reception this movie got, it totally seemed to pay off. However, I'm pretty sure this movie's only celebrated as much as it is because of this one particular moment where we get a gratuitous Godzilla gooch shot. I've seen the drawings some of you post on the Godzilla tag on Twitter. You guys make me sick. It's Godzilla gooch shot. Hey yo, check out my SoundCloud. The next two Millennium movies are actually the only ones to share continuity with one another. Godzilla Cross Mechagodzilla, labeled as Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla Stateside, probably to avoid confusion with the other similarly titled ones, which share the same title. Even though, like we said, the one from the 90s was called Mechagodzilla 2 internationally, which is stupid, and calling this one Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 3 would be even more stupid, because it has nothing to do with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and... Anyways, as you would expect, this one is another direct sequel to the original. Though, this one also incorporates non-Godzilla Showa Toho movies as canon as well, like the 1961 film Mothra and the War of the Gargantuas, which I absolutely love that they did that. GMK actually did something similar, in that not only did it reference the original Godzilla, but the 98 American Godzilla of all things. Damn, that's out of left field. But we're done tickling that movie's gooch. Back to Mechagodzilla. Once again, Mechagodzilla's origin has been reinvented. Like the previous incarnation, Mechagodzilla was created on Earth, rather than being a weapon created by aliens like the Showa movies, only this time there's one major difference in that this version was built around the skeletal remains of the original Godzilla from the first movie. So this one is really heavy on the callbacks to the first movie, even going as far as to create a replica from the waist up of the original suit for flashback scenes, and... Nice! But that's not all. When I talked about the scrapped idea for Godzilla vs. Destroyer earlier, in which Godzilla fights Ghost Godzilla, the spirit of the original, I alluded that that idea wasn't quite put to waste, and this is what I mean. While not exactly the same thing, this movie sees Mechagodzilla fighting the current Godzilla, and during the first battle, Godzilla roars, which awakens the soul of the original Godzilla inside Mechagodzilla, who then takes over and starts going berserk. God damn. The next one, Godzilla Mothra Mechagodzilla Tokyo SOS, or just short to Godzilla Tokyo SOS, picks up where Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla left off, and as the title suggests, brings Mothra into the fray as well, who looks fantastic this time around, by the way. This duology is referred to by fans as the Kiryu Saga, as this incarnation of Mechagodzilla is actually referred to as Kiryu in these movies, which is a name derived from the Japanese word Kikairyu, which translates to machine dragon. It's pretty appropriate because these movies are really centered around Kiryu. Godzilla almost acts like a supporting character in these ones, when he's not just standing around for some reason, letting his ass get kicked at least. GMK gets the most love, but honestly, I think the Kiryu movies might be my favorites in the Millennium series. I'm not really a big anime person, but these really do feel like live-action anime movies, so if that sounds appealing to you, this might be a good place to start if you want to get into Godzilla. By the way, what's your favorite anime? Mine's Seinfeld! It's funny because that's not actually an anime! The last movie in the Millennium series, Godzilla Final Wars, is stupid, but in a fun kind of way. This movie feels like a spiritual successor to Destroy All Monsters, where it takes a shitload of monsters and throws them into one movie. A lot of the classics are here, now sporting new designs, which are pretty hit or miss, but screw it, we finally got Gigan again! He was sorely missed in the Heisei series, and since he's my favorite Godzilla enemy, I was stoked to see him. Crazily enough, we also got the 98 American Godzilla in this movie, who at this point was officially rebranded as Zilla, as the creators thought the 98 movie took the God out of Godzilla. That's so petty. And I love it. Still better than the fan-given nickname, Gino, which is an anagram for Godzilla in name only. I just call him Godzilla 98 because I'm not a punk. Anyways, he gets his ass royally handed to him by the Japanese Godzilla while a Sum 41 song plays in the background. This movie's surreal. It also features what's probably the toughest Godzilla yet. Don't let this rat-looking fuck fool ya. He plows through everyone, kicking their asses one by one. This movie feels like it has ADHD. Everyone's fighting and jumping around. It's nuts. It also has a weird look to it. I don't know, maybe it's the color correction on it? It looks kinda ugly. Final Wars was made knowing it would be the last Godzilla movie for a while. Because of that, they really went in all guns blazing trying to celebrate 50 years of the franchise's history at that point. In theory, a movie like this would make for a great, loving send-off. But you know, now that I'm taking another look at it, I'm realizing it might be a little too bonkers and too stupid. Perhaps I'm being too harsh. Maybe it's not that stupid. After Godzilla Final Wars, the series would once again go on a hiatus. However, during the mid-2000s, a theatrical short was getting kicked around that was supposed to be exclusive for the IMAX 3D format called Godzilla 3D to the Max. It was supposed to be helmed by Yoshimitsu Banno, who directed the 1971 movie Godzilla vs. Ghidorah. 3D to the Max was almost going to act as sort of a spiritual sequel to Ghidorah, and the idea was that it would be targeted to a more Western market. The movie's funding was approved by Toho, and it was slated to be released in 2009, but the project as it was became scrapped, and eventually evolved into something much bigger. When this movie was getting shopped around, one of the producers brought it over to Legendary Pictures, who expressed interest in the project. After the movie missed its targeted release window, rumors started circulating that Legendary Pictures and Toho were working on a deal for the former to produce a brand new American Godzilla reboot, and in 2010, it was officially announced. Legendary's Godzilla had a small presence at Comic-Con that year in the form of early promotional art, and this one image alone already showed so much promise. Today, it might not seem like much. You look at it and think, okay, he's just standing there, menacingly! But you gotta remember where we came from. At the time, the lingering stench of America's first crack at Godzilla was still in the air, even over a decade later at that point. It's like when someone pukes in your car. You clean it to the point where you become obsessed and maybe buy yourself a Sonic the Hedgehog air freshener after your 6th go-around. And your friends start telling you, hey man, the smell's gone. Give it a break. And you want to believe them, but something's stopping you from just relaxing. Maybe it's just a placebo effect from the OCD behavior on display, but ultimately, you just can't let it go. You can't forget. You know what happened there, and it will haunt you forever. That's your curse, a blight that you've been dealt with. And no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you can't run from it. Anyways, the movie would go on to be directed by Gareth Edwards, whose sole previous directing credit consisted of the independent sci-fi horror movie Monsters, and who would go on to direct the first Star Wars anthology movie, Rogue One. Probably, I guess. I don't know, he got the directing credit, so. And after a 2-year delay, America's second attempt at a Godzilla movie was released summer of 2014. And I guess second time's a charm because everyone collectively went, shit man, that's how you do it. For the most part. The movie was a critical success, but kinda had fans and general audiences split down the middle. There's one specific overarching grievance people had with this movie, and I can sum it up with this little ditty. Do you have the time to listen to me whine about Godzilla's severe lack of screen time? Godzilla being in a movie for under 10 minutes isn't anything new, and I feel like a good chunk of the people that criticize this are maybe those that aren't really familiar with Godzilla and have their own ideas in their heads about what Godzilla is, which is totally fine, but when it doesn't meet those expectations, it feels like they're quick to dismiss it. Now, one thing you'll hear a lot of people say is, oh, I just want to watch Godzilla fight and destroy shit, I don't care about the stupid humans, when criticizing a Godzilla movie. And sure, that's definitely an opinion. It's, how can I word this? Fucking stupid, but nevertheless, it's an opinion. I mean, all art is subjective, but if you ask me, 2 hours of gratuitous smashy monster action is something you think you want, but really, you don't. You're just gonna get numb to it pretty quick. But I can see how the idea of that would be tantalizing when the human story is just so boring. It's a balancing act, and as a fan, that's where I can say I was disappointed. Again, the idea of these episodes is not to give reviews of these movies, that's something I'd like to do later down the road. This is more of an overview of the series so far, but I still want to try to put things in perspective here. Speaking from personal experience, the lead up to this movie was insane. Its announcement came when I was in my late teens and going through an embarrassing, pretentious film snobby phase, and was eventually released when I was in my early 20s, where my dumb ass was at peak pretentiousness. I followed the production religiously, religiously, checking for news sometimes multiple times a day because apparently my life had spiraled out of control at that point, and I just ate everything up, man. Early on, it was announced that David S. Goyer, who was the story writer for the Dark Knight trilogy, would be one of the writers for Godzilla, and later on, they also added Frank Darabont, who directed the friggin' Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite movies of all time. I was so stoked, man. It was starting to feel as if the '98 Godzilla remake was what the Joel Schumacher movies were to Batman, and that this was gonna be our Dark Knight. I mean, shit, this was the same studio and everything. Then, the casting announcements started rolling out. I mean, holy shit, they got Juliette Binoche! As an Academy Award nominated Juliette Binoche! Now, I've never seen anything she's been in, but she was Oscars. She was in movies nominated for Oscars. And according to everybody, she's a prestigious actor, and this is a really big get. And because I have no personality, of course I'm gonna pretend to be excited too. I mean, be excited too. Really though, the announcement that got my hype levels through the roof was the casting of Bryan Cranston, hot on the heels of Breaking Bad, which like many people, was my favorite thing in the world at the time. This movie had a lot of talent behind it, not just in front of the camera, and it was really shaping up to be something truly special. I feel like my inner child, who would constantly defend Godzilla from naysayers all those years ago and would have gladly died on that hill, was thrilled at the prospect of Godzilla finally getting treated with some respect from Western audiences. The cast and crew were always touting that this wasn't just your standard monster movie, but that it was this strong, character-driven story. Bryan Cranston himself would always make it a point to mention this in interviews.
The foundation of a film are characters.
Character development.
Invest in these people. Intricate plot lines. Foundation of plot, a really intricate plot.
Character-driven model.
A character-driven component. Story.
Character.
Story is first. The script, second, supports that.
We really took the time to invest in the characters.
Am I invested? Do I care about these people?
Very strong husband-wife.
You stupid bitch.
Father-son relationships.
Sleep well, my little angels. The characters.
Looking back on it, yeah, it's just your standard PR talk. I mean, you got a movie to sell. But when the director starts talking about his influences and lists Jaws as one of them, my ears perk up. Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. So now, you're just sweetening me up even more. It was even revealed that the last name of the main character was Brody. Like Chief Brody from Jaws! Chief Brody's name was Brody too! Oh my god! It's like they were making this movie for me! And after years of waiting, I hauled ass to the theater, first showing of the early Thursday screenings, and... not gonna lie, I was initially disappointed. All the hullabaloo over this engaging story with great characters, and it was just your standard mediocre Hollywood blockbuster fare. The human element ended up being the weakest link in the entire movie by far, and I just found it flat out boring on my first viewing. There's a lot of great world building here, and some genuinely interesting characters, but the movie chooses to not focus on them. Instead, we're stuck with a main character that has as much charisma as a bologna sandwich and a bunch of tedious military shit. When that's the case, yeah, I was starting to get antsy waiting for Godzilla to show up. I was craving it at that point. I didn't care about G.I. Generic over here or his plight. So when they kept cutting away from the monsters, my balls were bluer than Godzilla's atomic breath, which was awesome, by the way. But yeah, I did say monsters, plural. Godzilla isn't alone in this reboot. He's joined by two original creatures called Mutos, an anagram for massive, unidentified terrestrial organism. They're kind of an amalgamation of other Hollywood creatures, but still somehow feel unique, especially in the sound department. They're actually pretty rad. Despite that, I feel like these creatures actually present the biggest problem of the movie, and it's not Godzilla's screen time, but rather where the focus lies. The movie's called Godzilla, but it's not really about Godzilla. The Mutos are the primary focus when it comes to the monster stuff. Godzilla just shows up to save the day, kind of like the late Showa movies. So it's like you have three layers: the human story, the Mutos, and at the very bottom, Godzilla. Now, I can understand the mentality of wanting to hold back and tease the monster for the climax a la Jaws, but Jaws this is not, my friends. In Jaws, when the shark wasn't on screen, you were still invested because the characters are so likable and even mesmerizing. You get a glimpse of that here, but then it feels like the movie gets distracted and focuses on the less interesting shit. It's like if in Jaws, they had the three main leads pissed off for a majority of the movie, and the focus was instead on Hendrix practicing his penmanship after the chief clowns his ass for his shitty handwriting. All while he does that, he's just conveniently always where there's a bunch of mobsters causing a ruckus and children karateing a bunch of shit in the background. Oh, and also, the shark is there sometimes too, I don't know, maybe. Even in the other Godzilla movies, where his screen time is comparable to this one, when he's not on screen, his presence is still felt. Characters are always talking about him. Here, he's barely on screen, and he's barely even mentioned. One line in particular stands out as being pretty funny in its irony.
And where's Godzilla?
Yeah, really? Where is this goddamn prima donna? So when the human element isn't very strong, and the focus of the movie isn't even on the title character, yeah, I can see how the screen time, something that normally wouldn't be an issue, can be a bit more glaring. On the bright side though, when Godzilla is on screen, it is the very definition of awesome. Oh yeah, it inspires awe. While Godzilla 98 featured more screen time for the character, the Godzilla on screen pales in comparison to the real Godzilla. This is Godzilla, and even with half the screen time, he makes a much bigger impact. And wow, what a crazy concept! He actually looks like Godzilla this time. Seriously, if you ask me, this is one of the best Godzilla designs around and perfectly modernizes the character. Stupidly, there were some dumb stupid idiots that would comment that this Godzilla looked too fat, and it's asinine because, hey, dummies, have you ever even seen a Godzilla design before? He's always been a big chonker. Also, this Godzilla isn't even fat. He's goddamn ripped. They undoubtedly got the character right. And in the moments where he's actually on screen, it's absolutely incredible and definitely leaves an impression. I've definitely warmed up to this movie over the years, and my initial disappointment was largely my fault. I hyped this movie up so much and pictured it in my head for years, so when it didn't fully meet my expectations, I was bummed. Just like the general audiences who don't know what a Godzilla is, watching it, probably expecting it to be like the stereotypes they've got in their heads, so it's totally on me. But despite its flaws, I still think it's a solid movie. It's well directed, looks and sounds amazing, and overall, it respects the source material, and it also laid down a solid foundation for what was to come. Not a terrible introduction to Godzilla for people that may find a modern movie to be more palatable than an old school style Japanese suitmation movie. If you check this one out, just make sure you turn that brightness up on your TV. For some reason, the transfer on home video is dark as shit and totally does this movie a disservice. Godzilla 2014 was not only a critical success, but financially successful as well, and would go on to earn over $500 million worldwide at the end of its run. Things were looking so good that they announced not one, but 2 sequels at opening weekend, and 2 months after that, Legendary announced that Godzilla would once again share the screen, only this time with a couple familiar faces. It was a pretty exciting time, and it looked like Godzilla was back in full swing. But there were even more surprises Legendary was cooking up, and we had no idea what was coming. Not wanting to feel left out, Japan was cooking up their own Godzilla-ness as well. Only this time, instead of trying to save face after America screwed the pooch, it's as if they saw what we were doing and thought, well, I want in on the fun too. And so, 2016 saw the release of Shin Godzilla, a full-fledged reboot and Toho's first Godzilla movie in 12 years. Technically being released in Japan's Heisei period like the Millennium series that preceded it, since the Heisei reign only ended recently in April of 2019. But Shin Godzilla appears to be seen as part of a new era of Godzilla, the Reiwa era, once again corresponding with the era of Japan. The Shin in Shin Godzilla is a syllable that could convey a couple different meanings, like new, true, or god. True Godzilla, huh? It's kinda cheeky. Almost as if they looked at Godzilla 2014 and said, "This is the real Godzilla, you fat American boobs." Now, if you thought Godzilla 2014 was divisive with fans, holy shit, you ain't seen shit yet, Chiefy. Shin Godzilla might just be the most divisive Godzilla movie in recent memory with Western fans, but in Japan, it was an absolute phenomenon. Shit. It was nominated for 11 awards at the Japan Academy Film Prize and won 7, including Picture of the Year, the Japanese equivalent of winning a Best Picture Oscar at the Academy Awards. To put things in perspective, It was also the highest grossing live-action movie of 2016 in Japan, and like we talked about earlier, beat Godzilla vs. Mothra and became the highest grossing Japanese Godzilla movie of all time. They also erected a giant statue of the Godzilla design from this movie in what's now known as Godzilla Square in Hibiya in Japan, which contains the original script and storyboards from the first Godzilla movie inside, replacing the previous Godzilla statue that was once there, which depicted the Heisei design. To say this movie resonated with the Japanese audience is an understatement. It was a big deal. Shin Godzilla was directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, both winning the Director of the Year award at the Japanese Academy Awards. Anno, who's best known as the creator of the popular anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, and Higuchi, special effects director for the awesome Gamera trilogy I mentioned earlier, crafted what could possibly be the most thought-provoking and impactful Godzilla movie since the original. Like the original Godzilla, Shin Godzilla draws its inspiration from real-world events. The original being a response to the devastation of nuclear fallout Japan experienced during World War II with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, while Shin was inspired by the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, an aftermath of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, as well as the Japanese government's handling of that situation. Barring the crazy shit Godzilla does in this movie, and his existence in general, this is probably the most realistic take on Godzilla yet. Which is a weird thing to say, but pretending for a minute that Godzilla was real and just showed up in Japan one day, this is probably the closest the movie's gotten to showing just how it would probably go down. This is totally the movie pretentious early 20s Alex wanted back in 2014. This movie takes the what if Godzilla was real concept and just runs with it. So much so that the characters in this movie don't really feel like your typical characters in a movie. They just feel like people. Anytime there's a location change or someone's introduced, there's a barrage of text on the screen. Their name, job title, date of birth, social security number, t-shirt size, Super Smash Bros. Main, and that's on top of the subtitles. Damn, no wonder this movie didn't resonate as well with Western audiences. Dumbass Americans don't want to read! As for Godzilla himself, it's crazy that they managed to make something so radically different, yet familiar at the same time. I don't want to give away any spoilers here, but let's just say that this Godzilla does everything you'd expect a Godzilla to do, and then some. Instead of a man in a suit, Toho opted to create a completely CGI Godzilla, which actually looks really good, especially when you consider that the budget for this movie is nowhere near that of an American blockbuster. This won't be the first time Godzilla appeared solely as a CG character in a Japanese movie though, as he made a cameo in 2007's Always, Sunset on 3rd Street 2, where he was completely digital. They were also set to use an animatronic for Shin Godzilla, but this was ultimately scrapped in favor of 100% CG. Kind of a bummer since this thing looks super cool. His design in Shin Godzilla is really gnarly, man. All disfigured and burnt, complete with a creepy ass dead-eyed stare. Holy shit. He kinda looks like a peach pit with googly eyes. I'm frightened. Shinji Higuchi was quoted as saying he wanted to showcase the most terrifying Godzilla that Japan's cutting-edge special effects movie making can muster. And I think they delivered. So much so that it almost comes off as weird that they use this design as somewhat of a mascot for theme park rides and shit. But that's the power Shin Godzilla has in Japan. In the US, Shin Godzilla had a limited theatrical run a few months after it premiered in Japan, where it was presented in Japanese with English subtitles and was distributed by Funimation, who also released it on Blu-ray and DVD. For a hot second, this movie was marketed as Godzilla Resurgence outside Japan, because again, one title just isn't good enough. But that name was ultimately dropped, and when Funimation released it, it stayed as Shin Godzilla. Personally, I think they just scrapped that because they knew they couldn't come up with a better alternate title to a movie than Taiwan did for Godzilla vs. Biollante, where over there, it was apparently titled Big Dinosaurs, holy shit! Now that's a title! That's a movie I'd like to see! Shin Godzilla is hailed as one of the best Godzilla movies of all time, and some even call it the best next to the original. This movie is definitely not for everybody though. Given the minimal Godzilla action, heavy dialogue, and political satire so ingrained in Japanese bureaucracy and events that happen in Japan, I can see how there could be a bit of a disconnect with non-Japanese audiences if they don't have the full context. I'm definitely not saying this movie doesn't work if you're not Japanese, I just think it's important to know what you're getting going in. But to be fair, you have to have a really high IQ to understand Shin Godzilla. Before we look at Toho's next Godzilla offerings, we're gonna moonwalk back to America real quick and talk about a non-Godzilla movie? Monkeys? Helicopters? John C. Reilly's? What the hell? In 2013, Legendary's partnership with Warner Brothers was expiring, and a new agreement was made to have Universal take their place as co-financiers and distributors. There, a new King Kong movie was under development, a supposed origin movie titled Skull Island. Later in the next year, it was announced that Legendary had plucked the Kong project from Universal and plooped it back over to Warner Brothers, who they were still involved with the planned Godzilla 2014 sequels. So now you have Godzilla and Kong under the same roof, and they're being coy about it, but we knew what this meant. The rumors were circulating almost instantly, and we knew what was coming. They were gonna take Godzilla and Kong, respectively, and shoehorn them in a shitty new direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie. On October 14th, 2015, it was announced that Godzilla and Kong would unite and become part of a bigger universe, the MonsterVerse, as it would come to be known 2 years later. Using Godzilla 2014 as a jumping-off point, it would be followed by Kong, Skull Island, a prequel taking place in the 70s, Godzilla 2, later officially titled Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and in 2020, Godzilla vs. Kong, the first time these two will share the screen together in almost 60 years. The news shook the world, and everybody collectively went, neat. Rather than being a prequel to King Kong, Kong Skull Island would end up being a complete reboot to the King Kong franchise, similar to what Godzilla 2014 was for the Godzilla franchise. Now that the shared cinematic universe was established, the two movies after Godzilla 2014 would contain references to one another, and were mainly linked together by Monarch, the fictional organization from Godzilla 2014 tasked to hunt and study these monsters. Monarch would appear in every movie, and the lore of the MonsterVerse would continue to be fleshed out in other mediums as well, in the form of prequel and sequel graphic novels. We'll get to the Godzilla 2014 sequel in just a sec, but since this video is about Godzilla, we're gonna look at Kong Skull Island in more detail another time. Maybe an Intro to Kong Movies episode needs to happen. Back in Japan, Toho was continuing to experiment with the Godzilla franchise, dishing out stuff that we haven't quite seen before, such as Godzilla's first animated feature film, 2017's Godzilla, Planet of the Monsters. This was the first in a trilogy, followed by Godzilla, City on the Edge of Battle, and Godzilla, the Planet Eater, both of which were released the following year in Japan, and are all considered part of the new Reiwa era. We've seen Godzilla in animation on TV before, but this is the first time he's had a full-length animated movie. As an animator and someone who's just interested in animation in general, I was always pining for an animated Godzilla movie. With animation, you can do anything, so that opens up so many possibilities with Godzilla. The story centers around humanity basically up and leaving Earth in a giant spaceship because it was overrun by monsters. Holy shit. When they return to Earth to see what's come of it, they find out that 20,000 years have passed because of time dilation and relativistic effects. That's actually a really cool concept. The sequels also reinvent classic monsters like Mechagodzilla and Ghidorah and does some crazy and flat out weird and unique shit with them. Mechagodzilla, for example, starts off as your standard Mechagodzilla, despite looking like a robotic pincushion, but after losing to Godzilla, he remains on Earth where his head and AI remain intact, and the metal alloy that he's made of, provided by aliens? Yeah, there's also aliens in these movies? Starts spreading around the area it's in and creates a friggin' Mechagodzilla city! Literally, that's what they call it. Ghidorah is a cosmic entity that exists in voids between dimensions, that travels through portals because he's made out of pure energy and not physical matter, and his necks can extend and pop out from literally anywhere, and holy shit, this stuff is gonzo, man! All this stuff sounds so unique and so cool. But where they kinda shit the bed is with the execution. Unfortunately, these movies don't really do these ideas justice. Well, I can only really speak for the first one. I'm not gonna lie, the second and third movies in the trilogy are the only Godzilla movies that I've yet to see. I was so bored and put off from the first one that I found it hard to muster up the will to watch the other two. Planet of the Monsters almost instantly became my least favorite Godzilla movie of all time. It was a slog to get through. I know this is super unprofessional, but with the other two, I just watch clips and research them online, so I can't give a fully fair assessment right now. But what I can say is that they're movies that you can watch with your eyeballs, probably. And apparently can wipe your ass with them too. And that's not me trying to be funny. In Japan, theaters had Godzilla the Planet Eater themed toilet paper in their bathrooms. How appropriate, because that's what I'd like to do with these movies. Ha, I'm just kidding. I'd never do that! I love movies! That seems to be the consensus a lot of people have with this trilogy. Cool, unique ideas, sloppy execution. And according to some fans, the second movie's the worst of the bunch, and the third is the best. I'll get to those other two eventually, though I'll probably have to make a drinking game out of it. Maybe take a shot every time the main character Haruo is a stupid, unlikable asshole. But then again, maybe not. I'd like to keep my liver intact. In the US, these movies were released exclusively on Netflix, so if you want to form your own opinion, that's the only place to legally watch them, as at the time of this recording, no Blu-ray or DVD has been released outside Japan. Speaking personally as someone who's into animation, Godzilla's first outing as an animated feature is really a mixed bag to me. But despite that, something I actually commend them for is trying something new. Even if they didn't quite stick the landing, I like the direction they're going in. Right now, America's doing stuff that feels like traditional Godzilla movies that stick to a classic formula, which is cool because it feels like a novelty to see it done with a Hollywood budget. So I like that over in Japan, they're trying to do something different and experiment more. I also think a lot of the designs in these movies are really awesome, but man, I'm really not a fan of that 3D faux anime look. Curiously, the animated Godzilla kind of bears a resemblance to Legendary's MonsterVerse Godzilla. There's no connection other than it, well, being Godzilla. But now, let's talk about something that is connected to the MonsterVerse. The most recent Godzilla movie released at the time of this episode, sequel to Godzilla 2014, and third in the MonsterVerse following Kong Skull Island, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. No relation to the 1956 movie, other than it, being Godzilla. Now, I don't want this episode to just fizzle out towards the end, but fair warning, I'm gonna get kind of personal with this one. Because this time, it's personal. I'm not going to talk about the movie itself too much because we're definitely going to get to it another time. And then also, doing so might just make me angry. Not because this movie's bad or anything, far from it. It's actually because I love this movie so much, and I feel like I'm living in a goddamn Twilight Zone episode where everyone just collectively dropped trow, squatted down, and farted in this movie's beautiful face. And it's like, I'm the only sane one. What the hell happened May of 2019? Was Mercury in retrograde and everyone's brain just malfunctioned? Both Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, positive critical reception, made $1 billion combined. Here comes King of the Monsters, the best movie in the MonsterVerse so far, mediocre reviews, and like well over $100 million less than the previous two installments at the box office. Hell, even one of Warner Brothers' other movies, Jorker, an R-rated movie, managed to crack over $1 billion at the box office. And I get it. You're probably sitting there thinking, oh my god, who cares? And normally, I'd agree with you, but something just doesn't sit right with me here. This is a wonderful movie, and I think it unfairly got shat on. I feel like I don't see what a lot of people are seeing. Actually, I think I see a lot there that other people aren't seeing. There's been criticisms aimed at the story, characters, writing, and I'm gonna be flat out honest. I think all of these elements are a step up from the previous two movies. Are these things best picture quality? No, of course not. But I think they're more than serviceable, and as part of a complete package, it works. Maybe there's a slight bias on my part because this movie's almost like a spiritual remake of one of my favorite Godzilla movies, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. A couple months after the release of Godzilla 2014, Legendary announced that Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah would be joining Godzilla, and the hype levels rocketed through the roof and into the stratosphere. Before Godzilla 2014 premiered, the marketing almost seemed to be keeping it a secret that there were other monsters, with the Mutos only appearing for a few frames, usually obscured, in trailers and TV spots. Unless people were following things closely and knew of things like Comic-Con footage descriptions and leaked toy designs, they probably didn't even know that Godzilla was gonna fight other monsters. But one shot in particular from the trailer sparked a lot of rumors, the one of the male Muto diving down, which led to a lot of people speculating that this was either Rodan or Mothra. And so, these rumors spread like wildfire, getting picked up by news sites and being repeated by people pretending to give a shit because, hey, being a nerd is cool!
Wait, what's that thing straight ahead? Is that anything? Is that Mothra?
Well, guess what? 5 years later, you get both Mothra and Rodan, and surprise, surprise, nobody gave a shit. Well, I did. Okay, obviously this video has various levels of exaggeration. I mean, I opened it up screaming at the top of my lungs all, haha, funny yelling YouTube, man. Audience reception for this movie was actually reportedly higher than both previous MonsterVerse movies, so it has its fans. Where it seems to be pretty divided though, is actually with Godzilla fans. Notice a trend? You can probably say that about every Godzilla movie, except maybe the original, which is almost unanimously regarded as sacred. If someone doesn't like something I like, that's totally cool, man. Like what you like. And if you don't like this movie, more power to you. I think what irks me when it comes to Godzilla fans specifically criticizing this movie is how they present it. They're, how can I word this? Massive, unwashed, gaping assholes about it. Godzilla King of the Monsters feels like a love letter to fans. Originally, Gareth Edwards was set to return in the directing chair, but stepped down due to wanting to pursue smaller scale projects. In his place was Michael Dougherty, director of cult classic Trick or Treat and Krampus, and self-proclaimed Godzilla fan. And it really shows. Sure, you could be a huge fan of the source material and still make a bad movie, but I don't think this movie is anywhere near bad. For me, it fired on all cylinders. This movie treats these monsters with so much reverence to the point where it practically worships them. It knows what it wants to be, a fun monster romp. I really do think that this movie succeeds in what it set out to do. To me, this was the Godzilla movie that I've wanted since I was a kid. I wanted to see these larger-than-life characters on the big screen in a movie with a Hollywood budget, and it didn't disappoint. I love that this movie propelled this new series forward into more fantastical territories, echoing the evolution the franchise went through during its early years. And the fact that we had not only Mothra, but King Ghidorah and Rodan in a Hollywood movie in the year 2019, and they were beautifully and faithfully recreated, that's something that's still mind-blowing to me. And to hear Akira Ifukube's Godzilla score in a blockbuster movie on the big screen, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I got pretty emotional over that. I'm probably about to lose all credibility with Godzilla fans right now, if I already haven't, but I don't really give a rat's cock and balls, so whatever. But I truly believe Godzilla King of the Monsters is a masterpiece, and a masterclass in how to faithfully and respectfully adapt a foreign property. I really thought this movie was going to be huge, that it would introduce a whole new generation to these iconic characters, so when it got the shaft, it was kind of a bummer, dude. It's like that inner child, at the ready to defend Godzilla against the naysayers until the very end, is still alive and well. But to be fair though, I think the reason Godzilla movies have been so polarizing amongst fans is because Godzilla can be, and has been, a lot of different things. In 65 plus years, the series has evolved so much and has attracted so many different types of people, and all jokes aside for a minute, I think that's awesome. Maybe King of the Monsters just didn't click for you, and that's fine. Maybe Godzilla vs. Kong, or Toho's planned cinematic universe, may end up being more your speed. It's almost like it doesn't matter who you are, because there's a Godzilla out there for you. Shit, is that corny! Delete that!
Oh.
Now in this episode, I talked about each respective movie's home video release as I got to the movie itself, which is what I should have freaking done in the first place instead of tacking it on to the end of the series like this. But hey, it's all about growth. My ass and my gut aren't the only things that grew in the last 3+ years. My brain did too. So now that we talked about everything after the Showa era, it's time we talk about the home video releases for the Showa era itself. Outside of Japan, Godzilla on home video has always been a huge honkin' mess, with the Showa series getting it the worst. Various different companies owning the rights to random movies in the series. Classic Media had these ones at some point, some with watered down versions that only include the English dubs, this Mechagodzilla movie but not that one, cause Sony had it along with 66's Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster and 67's Son of Godzilla, and all the 70s Godzilla movies except Godzilla vs. Megalon, because that one was in limbo for a while until Tokyo Shot got it, along with Destroy All Monsters, which was previously put out by ADV Films, but I guess they lost the rights to that one, kind of like how Sony apparently lost the rights to these ones because Kraken Releasing put them out, but not these ones. So what on earth happened to these ones? Because apparently they're in a limbo because nobody seems to want to put out these ones, and oh my god, screw this! Even when a company owns the rights to a good chunk of the movies, they manage to screw things up somehow. Sony has a massive chunk, owning the licenses to 5 out of the 7 Heisei movies and all the Millennium movies. Finally, we can work with this. With the Heisei movies you put them out individually on VHS, which is great, makes sense. But on DVD, you bundle them together with double feature releases, which, okay, I guess, still with ya. But you have an odd number of movies, so one needs to be separated, and okay, you did that with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 93. Cool, okay. The one released individually is sandwiched between the 2 double feature releases. That looks fine. And then the Millennium movies on DVD, all released individually. Mwah! Beautiful! I love it! And then you cock it all up with the big beef and boner that is the Blu-ray releases. You lump all the movies you have together under the Godzilla Toho Collection banner. Alright, whatever. For the Heisei lineup, you have Ghidorah and Mothra. Nice, familiar. Mechagodzilla and Space Godzilla. Okay, order shifted. Mechagodzilla was the odd man out before. Looks like Space Godzilla found himself a new roommate. So I guess that means Destoroyah will now be the outlier and oh, bullshit! You gotta be kidding me, man. This is so sloppy, man. Hasn't your mother taught you better, man? Not only is the second movie on here a completely unrelated one from a different series, it's not even the first movie in that series. It's the second one. If you're gonna insist on mashing them together, at least have the second movie be the next Godzilla movie released chronologically. No, not that one, you dip. The next Toho one, Godzilla 2000. And then go from there, and I guess have Godzilla Final Wars be the odd one out this time, since you'll have one left over. It's a landmark release, 50th anniversary film, it works. But no, they screw it up, and now pair the Millennium movies together, with the exception of Godzilla 2000, which was released on its own, and why the shit? This double feature format is practically tailor-made for the Millennium movies because there's 6 of them, so each one can get paired up with another! There's an odd number of Heisei movies, so those are the ones that need to be released on their own, not the evenly numbered Millennium movies! Oh! Why not do this with the Millennium movies and follow the same release format for the Heisei movies that you did with the DVD releases? Or better yet, just release them all goddamn separately. Racial segregation is fucking stupid. The Jim Crow laws were bullshit. All men and women are created equal, and I don't care if the syrup for my pancakes touches my sausage patties. That's all fine and good, but one thing I know for damn sure is that Godzilla vs. Destoroyah and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla should not be paired together on the same release. It should be that difficult! And I know what you're thinking! Alex, I'm sick of your OCD diatribes and your overall boobery! What does it matter as long as you get to watch the damn movie? And to that, I say, yes, that's true, but it still matters to me! This is all I have, goddammit! This is all I have!
Sir, this is the manager. You need to stop calling us. Now. You've been harassing our employees at the drive-thru, calling this location day in, day out. It needs to stop. These are fucking Taco Bell employees, not a therapist that you clearly need. Stop calling.
Thankfully, when it comes to Godzilla on home media, things are slowly headed in the right direction. Earlier, I mentioned having to rewrite this episode several times over the course of the 3 frickin' years since the last episode, and one of the reasons was because of the bombshell news that Criterion was putting out a big beef and Blu-ray set with all 15 Showa Godzilla movies, including the original Japanese version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, the first time this was ever officially made available in the US after 58 years. For Godzilla fans, this news almost felt like a godsend. The fact that someone was finally able to wrangle up the rights to all these movies is a pretty big deal. But of course, nothing's perfect. Fans can criticize the artwork used in this set and how some of it, including the front cover, features monster designs that aren't even from this era. And some will criticize the shoddy and outdated transfers that Toho provided Criterion, but then there are things that I think even casual audiences will take issue with. For one, not every movie in this collection features their respective English dubs. The American recut versions of the original Godzilla movie and King Kong vs. Godzilla are present, but for whatever reason, only 6 of the other movies have English dubs in this set. As someone who usually prefers to watch foreign movies in their original native language with subtitles, I'm not all that affected by this, but I still think it's important for both versions to be included. Not everyone's gonna be like me and want to watch a movie subtitled. Some people out there might want to introduce these movies to their kids, and with this set in particular, it might be kind of a hard sell for a young kid to sit there and have to watch a movie subtitled. Hell, some people might just be nostalgic for the English dubs and would just prefer to watch them that way. I know that for me, the one exception is the Showa Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. That was the first Godzilla movie I ever watched as a kid, and of course it was dubbed, so I have a soft spot for it and actually prefer to watch it that way. I may be lucky because that's one of the dubs that's actually in this set, but I know I'd be pretty bummed if that option wasn't there. While these movies seem to be more accessible than ever, and we're seemingly on the right track here, it sometimes feels like we take a few steps forward and then a couple back. But forget about this sub versus dub malarkey. We haven't even talked about the real issue here. Why the hell is this set so goddamn big? This is a coffee table book, not a Blu-ray case. How the hell is this gonna look good displayed with all the other Godzilla Blu-rays? Better yet, how the fart am I gonna fit this on my movie shelf? I can't take it anymore! I'm so exasperated! I just... As of right now, Criterion is releasing the Showa Godzilla movies as part of a set, not individually. The only exception is the original Godzilla, which they already put out on Blu-ray and DVD back in 2012, but all of them, except King Kong vs. Godzilla, are available for streaming on their Criterion channel service. The American re-edited version of King Kong vs. Godzilla is available on DVD and Blu-ray if you just want to get that one separately, but the Japanese version is only available in the Criterion set, which is actually on the supplements disc, by the way. It kinda sucks that as a Godzilla fan, the attitude is usually, you take what you can get. And it often feels like companies half-ass things when it comes to Godzilla. Half the time, though, a lot of it is the result of Toho's seemingly weird stipulations. Toho's known for being rather restrictive when it comes to what other companies can and can't do, and what they're allowed access to, and it's the fans that ultimately suffer as a result, as dramatic as that sounds. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have all the Showa movies in one package like this, and Criterion clearly put effort with this release, but there's glaring omissions here that keep it from being the definitive collection that it could have been. And not allowing a company like Criterion, who are known for their extensive restorations, to take a crack at these movies is just ass backwards, man. Also, only allowing Criterion to use old transfers that they dumped on them when better ones exist just adds more insult to injury. Toho's like that friend that keeps the good controller for themselves and gives you that disgusting one that's got sticky buttons with something rattling inside when you shake it, and in general just looks like it's been up their dog's ass. Except in this situation, you could potentially use your own pristine controller, only Toho slaps it out of your hand and insists that you use their crusty one. Well, damn. I hope now you can see why I said Godzilla on home video is such a mess outside Japan. Rights issues up the ass, various different companies getting their grubby little sausage links involved, dropping the ball, or just taking the ball, going home and doing nothing with it. It's disgusting. As a Godzilla fan, I always looked with envy at all these big franchise movie collections. Even the ones that are plagued with similar situations manage to get their shit together, even if only momentarily. And as an American Godzilla fan, I look over at what Japan's doing with big ol' eyes, frothing at the mouth. If I could have a single genie wish, say it's a shitty genie like Sinbad or something, and I only get one instead of three, what do you think I'd wish for? End world hunger? World peace, maybe? Hell no. I'd wish for a big, honkin' Godzilla movie set that collects all the movies from each era in a nice, beautiful presentation with keep cases and fat, sexy unison, and I'd wish for it to only be available in Region 1, because I'm a greedy American fatso. But alas, that kind of magic only exists in Japan. Thankfully, importing is a thing. Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for this.
Banana now.
Whoa, baby! Censor your porn, am I right, fellas? No horny on main! Oh my god, funny jokes on the internet! This is the Godzilla Final Box, released in Japan 15 years ago in celebration of Godzilla's 50th anniversary, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It included every Godzilla movie released up until that point, sans the '98 remake, all in one amazing presentation. I could literally cry right now. The consistency! Oh, my OCD likes it! Also included is a book showcasing all the Japanese Godzilla movie posters from 1954 through 2004, which is phenomenal. And, of course, the massively eye-catching Godzilla 54 bust. If I'm not mistaken, this is 1-to-1 the size of the head from the actual suit, and that's just awesome, man. This is something I've been after for a while. Even if these DVDs are mostly impractical when it comes to their intended use, which is to watch them, the discs are Region 2, meaning they won't play in a regular American DVD player. You'd need a region-free player to watch them, but even then, there's no English subtitles, so it's more of a collector piece. I'm mainly showing this as an example of how to do the ultimate box set. The poster guide and the head bust put this thing on a whole nother level, but it's really how the movies are presented that make this thing an absolute dream. Being 15 years old at this point and being released exclusively in Japan, this set goes for ridiculous amounts in the US aftermarket, even incomplete. You gotta know where to look, and luckily I know a guy. Huge shout out to Nate, who runs the Half-Baked Fantasy store with his wife Clarissa, and who you'd see in the dealer's room at G-Fest, the annual Godzilla convention in Rosemont, Illinois. Pretty sure we took a picture together at the con. I'll put it up here or some shit. But he gave me a great deal, and I don't have to pay anywhere near the amount that you'd see this thing go for online. So thanks, Nate. He also included a note in the box. Let's see here. Dear Alex, thank you so much for buying the Godzilla Final Box. Just so you know, this is not a complete set. 3 of the DVDs are missing. Aw, dang. Oh well, can't win them all. But don't worry, I've included replacement discs for these 3 movies that may actually end up increasing the value of this entire set. Well, never mind, I guess I can. Haha, Alex wins. The one aspect of this episode that I actually hope will be outdated one day is a lot of the home media talk. It'd be quite swell if in the future we could look back on this and say, man, I can't believe things used to be that complicated, as we then turn around and lovingly gaze at the sweet, complete Godzilla movie collection on our shelves with a big smile, only to immediately be followed by a bunch of tears as the midlife crisis reaches its apex. And if not all the movies released up until that point, at least something that mirrors the Godzilla Final Box. Call it Godzilla, the first 50 years movie collection or something. I know it's a pipe dream at this point, but come on, somebody's gotta do it. Well, ladies and gents, I'm getting kind of tired and crabby, so I'm gonna go. Hope you learned a thing or two, or 12, maybe 20. If you like what you saw, go ahead and hit the like thing, and if you're a freak and you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that bell, because I guess, just clicking subscribe isn't enough anymore. Yeah. Anyways, see ya. Yeah, alrighty. Why is he so heavy?